The angels draw close to you now because something inside you has already changed. Even if part of you is still resisting that truth, there is a quiet but undeniable shift in your inner frequency, and it has begun to crack the structure of the life you once knew. You may feel disoriented, sensitive, or strangely detached from things that used to define you. This is not confusion without purpose. This is the result of an inner elevation that your ego has not yet learned how to interpret. The angels want you to know that nothing is wrong with you. What feels unstable is actually the old reality losing its grip, and there is something very important you need to understand before fear tries to take control. You may notice that certain conversations no longer hold your attention. Old dramas feel heavy, repetitive, even exhausting. People you once tried so hard to please now feel distant, not because you are cold, but because your inner truth has become louder than your need for approval. This can create guilt, and your ego may whisper that you are becoming selfish or disconnected. But the angels say this withdrawal is not rejection, it is recalibration. Your inner system no longer resonates with the frequency of survival, justification, or constant explanation. You are not abandoning others. You are finally choosing to stand where your soul feels steady. There is often pain in this phase, and the angels do not minimize it. You may grieve versions of yourself that worked so hard to belong, to fix, to endure. You may look back and wonder how you stayed so long in situations that drained you. This pain is not meant to punish you. It is meant to release you. Every tear carries information, and what it releases is the residue of an identity that was built to cope, not to thrive. Relief begins to arrive when you stop arguing with what no longer fits, even if your ego still tries to pull you backward for the sake of familiarity. Your body is also responding to this shift. You may feel tired in ways sleep does not fix, or energized at unexpected moments. Your nervous system is learning a new baseline. The angels explain that your old reality required constant alertness, emotional defense, and self-suppression. Your new frequency requires presence, honesty, and trust. The transition between these two states can feel uncomfortable because the ego was trained to equate tension with safety. When peace begins to appear, the ego may panic and search for problems. This does not mean you are regressing. It means your system is unlearning chaos. Before continuing this message, write in the comments this mantra: I trust the version of me that is emerging now. This simple act aligns your awareness with the truth the angels are revealing. Now, continuing the message. Another sign that your frequency has broken the old reality is the way time feels different. Things that once took effort now unfold with less resistance, or they fall away entirely without explanation. The ego wants to label this as loss or failure, but the angels see precision. What leaves now cannot follow you forward. What stays is being redefined. This is why forcing outcomes feels impossible. Your inner alignment has surpassed environments built on compromise. You are not stuck. You are ahead of your former self. You may also feel an unfamiliar loneliness even when surrounded by others. This is not emptiness, it is spaciousness. The angels say your inner world has expanded, but your outer world has not fully caught up yet. This gap can feel uncomfortable, and the ego may try to fill it with noise, distractions, or old habits. Resist the urge to rush. What is meant to meet you needs time to rise to your frequency. This pause is not punishment, it is preparation. Your intuition is sharper now, and that can feel threatening to the ego. You sense truths before they are spoken. You feel when something is misaligned without needing proof. This inner clarity removes the ego's favorite tools, doubt and delay. That is why your mind may argue with what your body already knows. The angels encourage you to trust the first signal, the quiet knowing, the immediate contraction or openness. This is not impulsiveness. This is coherence. You may notice that old fears resurface suddenly, not because they are returning, but because they are leaving. The ego often brings them up one last time to see if they still control you. When you respond differently, when you do not spiral or self-abandon, the pattern dissolves. This is a moment of deep satisfaction that arrives quietly. You realize you are no longer the same woman who needed to prove her worth through endurance. You are becoming someone who chooses peace without apology. The angels want you to hear this clearly. Your frequency did not break the old reality by accident. It happened because you finally stopped betraying yourself in small daily ways. You listened when something felt wrong. You paused instead of pushing. You spoke truth even when your voice shook. These choices accumulated, and now the structure built on your silence cannot hold. The ego may still argue, but it is losing authority. Something truer is taking the lead, and this is only the beginning of what is being rearranged for you. Before these words reached you, something within you was already listening. Share in the comments the city you're watching from, because this message is finding women across many places who are feeling the same inner shift. The angels draw attention now to the tension you may be feeling between who you used to be and who you are becoming. This tension is not a failure. It is evidence that your inner frequency has moved ahead of the identity your ego learned to protect. You may notice that your reactions are slower, more deliberate. Things that once triggered immediate emotion now pass through you with less force. This unsettles the ego because it was trained to survive through urgency. Calm feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliarity can feel like danger when you are still shedding an old structure. You may sense that your desires are changing in subtle but powerful ways. What once motivated you no longer carries the same charge. Goals that were built around validation or proving your worth may feel strangely empty now. This can bring discomfort because the ego wants clear labels and measurable outcomes. The angels say this emptiness is not loss, it is space. Space is required for a truer alignment to form. What is leaving was never meant to sustain you long term. Relationships are often the clearest mirror during this phase. You may feel misunderstood without having changed your words. You may feel unseen even when you are fully present. The angels explain that this happens when your inner truth no longer matches the role others expect you to play. Your ego may urge you to explain yourself, to soften, to return to the familiar dynamic, but your body resists. That resistance is wisdom. You are no longer designed to shrink in order to be accepted. There is also a deeper layer of grief that can surface unexpectedly. Grief for time spent enduring instead of choosing. Grief for versions of yourself who stayed quiet to keep peace. This grief does not mean you regret your path. It means you are honoring how much you carried. The angels invite you to let this sadness move through without turning it into self-judgment. Compassion toward your past self stabilizes your present frequency. Now, before we continue this message, write in the comments 888 to call in clarity and alignment. This small act signals readiness to receive what is unfolding. As you do this, if this message feels supportive, know that gentle support through the thanks button helps keep these messages flowing to others who need them too. Now, continuing the message, you may notice that your tolerance for dishonesty has decreased, including the dishonesty you once directed at yourself. You feel physical discomfort when you ignore your inner knowing. This is not sensitivity, this is integration. The angels say your mind and body are learning to work together instead of against each other. When alignment grows, excuses fall away. This can feel confronting because it removes the ability to blame circumstances for choices you no longer wish to make. Another sign of this frequency shift is the way rest feels different. Rest is no longer escape. It becomes nourishment. You may crave stillness instead of stimulation, depth instead of distraction. The ego often labels this as withdrawal or laziness, but the angels say you are restoring parts of yourself that were depleted by constant output. From this restoration, a new form of action will emerge, one that does not cost you your peace. You may also sense a growing impatience with waiting for permission. You no longer need external confirmation to trust your decisions. This can feel unsettling because certainty used to come from outside sources. Now it rises from within. The ego may fear making the wrong choice, but the angels remind you that alignment is not about perfection. It is about honesty. When your choices come from truth, they adjust naturally without punishment. There may be moments when you question whether you are becoming too detached, too different, too hard to relate to. The angels ask you to observe this thought gently. Detachment is not disconnection. It is discernment. You are learning where to place your energy so it can return to you multiplied instead of drained. This shift creates relief that the ego does not yet trust, because struggle once felt like proof of effort. Your inner voice is quieter now but clearer. It does not argue or justify, it simply knows. The ego may attempt to override this with logic rooted in fear. When that happens, the angels encourage you to pause rather than push. Pausing is no longer avoidance for you. It is alignment in action. In the pause, the old reality loses momentum. You are also becoming more aware of how your environment affects you. Certain places, media, or routines feel heavy now. This is not judgment. It is feedback. Your frequency requires coherence. You are no longer meant to adapt endlessly. You are meant to choose consciously. This choice creates satisfaction that does not rely on achievement, only authenticity. The angels want you to understand that the discomfort you feel is temporary, but the stability you are building is lasting. Your ego is learning to follow instead of lead. This transition may feel awkward, but it is natural. You are not losing yourself. You are reclaiming parts that were buried under expectation. As this block closes, trust that what feels uncertain now is organizing itself in your favor. You are not behind. You are precisely where the old reality can no longer reach you, and where the new one is beginning to recognize you. There is a growing awareness inside you now that certain patterns cannot be carried forward, no matter how familiar they feel. The angels are pointing to the subtle discomfort you experience when you consider returning to old ways of thinking, old compromises, or old explanations. That discomfort is not resistance for no reason. It is alignment asserting itself. Your frequency has shifted to a place where self-abandonment is no longer sustainable, even in small doses. What once felt normal now feels heavy, and that contrast is intentional. You may notice that you no longer rush to fill silence. Pauses feel meaningful instead of awkward. This is because your inner world has gained density and depth. The ego used to rely on noise to stay in control, to avoid feeling uncertainty. Now, silence gives you information. In quiet moments, you sense what is true without forcing clarity. The angels say this is a sign of maturity at the energetic level. You are no longer dependent on constant reassurance to feel safe. Another clear signal of this shift is how you relate to conflict. You may find that you no longer feel the urge to defend yourself the way you once did. Not because you agree with what is being said, but because your sense of self is no longer built on external validation. This can confuse people who were accustomed to your reactions. The ego might worry that staying calm means you are losing your voice. The angels assure you that your voice has simply changed tone. It no longer needs to shout to be heard. You may also feel an internal divide when making decisions. One part of you wants to choose what feels expansive and honest, while another part fears the consequences of stepping out of old agreements. This fear does not mean you are wrong. It means your ego is adjusting to a new reference point. The angels explain that fear often appears when the mind realizes it can no longer negotiate away your truth. What you are feeling is not doubt. It is the final negotiation of an outdated identity. Before continuing this message, if you are not subscribed to the channel yet, take a moment to subscribe. This helps keep these messages flowing and supports the creation of content meant to meet you in moments like this. Now continuing the message, your emotional responses may also feel different. You may still feel deeply, but the emotions move through you faster. You no longer stay stuck in stories that once consumed you for days or weeks. This is not detachment from feeling. It is emotional circulation. The angels say your system is learning how to process without attaching identity to pain. This creates relief that feels unfamiliar at first, because suffering used to feel like proof that you cared. There can be moments when you miss the intensity of the old reality, even if it hurt you. This does not mean you want it back. Intensity was once mistaken for connection, for purpose, for aliveness. Now you are discovering steadiness. Steadiness does not spike adrenaline, but it builds trust. The ego may label this as boredom, but your body recognizes it as safety. From safety, creativity and clarity naturally emerge. You may also notice that your intuition interrupts you more often. You stop mid-sentence. You pause before agreeing. You reconsider plans that once felt automatic. This interruption is not hesitation. It is alignment correcting course in real time. The angels highlight that your inner guidance is no longer content with being consulted only during crisis. It wants to be part of daily decision-making. This is a sign that trust has been rebuilt internally. There is also a shift in how you perceive success. External achievements may still matter, but they no longer define your worth. You feel less urgency to prove and more curiosity about what feels meaningful. This can feel unsettling, especially if your identity was built around productivity or endurance. The angels say you are redefining value. Value is no longer measured by how much you can tolerate, but by how honestly you can live. You might feel moments of guilt for not being as available as you once were. The ego may interpret boundaries as abandonment, but the angels remind you that availability without presence is depletion. You are learning to give from fullness rather than obligation. This creates fewer connections, but deeper ones. Quality begins to replace quantity, and your nervous system responds with relief. Another sign your frequency has moved beyond the old reality is the way you respond to uncertainty. You may still feel concern, but it no longer paralyzes you. You trust yourself to respond rather than predict. This trust did not appear overnight. It was built through countless moments where you survived what you once feared. The angels say your confidence now comes from evidence, not hope. Your dreams and inner imagery may also be changing. They may feel more symbolic, more direct, or more emotionally charged. This is your subconscious updating its language to match your conscious awareness. The ego may try to analyze these messages, but the angels encourage you to feel them instead. Meaning arrives faster through sensation than explanation right now. You may sense that certain doors are closing without drama. No conflict, no explanation, just a quiet ending. This is not avoidance, it is completion. The angels say when lessons are integrated, they no longer need intensity to conclude. Peaceful endings are a sign that something has been fully learned. As this block comes to a close, the angels want you to recognize the satisfaction growing beneath the surface. It is subtle, but steady. It comes from no longer betraying yourself to maintain old structures. Your ego may still hesitate, but it is learning to trust the ground beneath you. What you are building now does not require collapse to justify change. It is forming because you are finally ready to live without constant inner conflict. You may begin to sense a deeper honesty in yourself that cannot be turned off anymore. The angels are showing that this honesty is not harsh or aggressive, but steady and unavoidable. You feel it when you consider saying yes out of habit. You feel it when you start to explain something that no longer needs explanation. Your body signals first, tightening or softening before your mind catches up. This is your inner authority activating. The ego may still attempt to override it, but its influence weakens each time you choose truth over comfort. There is also a noticeable change in how you experience disappointment. Situations that once would have crushed you now feel instructive instead of personal. You still feel the sting, but it does not spiral into self-blame. The angels explain that this is because your sense of worth is no longer tied to outcomes. You are learning to separate effort from identity. When something does not work out, you no longer collapse inward. You adjust. This adjustment is a form of quiet power. You may also notice that patience is becoming more natural. Not the forced patience of waiting and enduring, but the grounded patience of trust. You are no longer chasing certainty. You allow things to reveal themselves. The ego often equates waiting with weakness, but the angels say your patience now comes from confidence. You know that what aligns with you cannot miss you. This knowing removes the urgency that once drove you to overextend. Another sign of this shift is the way your inner dialogue has softened. The critical voice that once narrated your every move is less dominant. It may still appear, but it no longer sounds like the ultimate authority. You question it. You pause before believing it. The angels say this is because you have stopped confusing familiarity with truth. Just because a thought has been there for a long time does not mean it deserves your loyalty. You may feel moments of clarity that arrive suddenly, without effort. A realization clicks into place, and you wonder why it took so long to see. These moments are not random. They are the result of accumulated alignment. The angels want you to recognize that insight arrives more easily now because resistance has decreased. You are no longer defending an outdated version of yourself. There can also be a subtle shift in how you experience joy. It may feel quieter, less dramatic, but more sustaining. You notice small moments more deeply. A sense of contentment appears without needing a reason. The ego may dismiss this as insignificant because it is not tied to achievement. But the angels say this form of joy is evidence of internal stability. It does not depend on circumstances. It grows from coherence. You might also find yourself less interested in convincing others of your perspective, not because you do not care, but because you trust that truth does not require force. This can feel unfamiliar if you once equated being understood with being safe. The angels say you are learning discernment. You choose where your energy goes and where silence speaks louder than explanation. There may be times when the old reality tries to pull you back through nostalgia. Memories resurface, highlighting only the good parts. The ego may use these memories to question your progress. The angels encourage you to remember the full picture. You did not leave because it was easy. You left because staying required you to betray yourself. Nostalgia does not mean you were wrong. It means you have integrated enough to look back without collapsing. You are also becoming more aware of how much effort it takes to pretend. Pretending drains you now. Performing costs too much. This awareness is not meant to isolate you. It is meant to guide you toward spaces where authenticity is natural. The angels say your system no longer has the capacity for constant adjustment. You are meant to be met, not managed. Another signal of this frequency shift is the way you handle mistakes. You correct them without shame. You learn without punishment. This is a profound change. The ego once used mistakes as evidence of unworthiness. Now they are simply information. The angels highlight that this shift alone changes everything. Growth accelerates when self-attack is removed. You may sense a growing trust in your timing. You no longer compare your pace to others. You recognize that alignment cannot be rushed. This trust brings relief, because comparison once kept you in a constant state of inadequacy. The angels say you are returning to your own rhythm, and your body recognizes this as safety. As this block settles, notice the quiet satisfaction beneath your awareness. It does not demand attention. It does not need validation. It comes from living with less inner resistance. Your ego may still question the unfamiliar calm, but your deeper self recognizes it as home. The old reality is no longer calling you back with authority. Its voice is fading, replaced by something steadier, something that knows where you are going even when you do not yet see the full path. There is a growing sense that you no longer need to brace yourself for life the way you once did. The angels are highlighting this shift because it can feel unsettling when vigilance fades. You spent so long anticipating disappointment, preparing for emotional impact, or scanning for what might go wrong. Now your system is learning that constant anticipation is not the same as wisdom. You feel more open, but also more exposed. This vulnerability is not weakness. It is the result of no longer living behind internal armor. You may notice that your reactions are no longer immediate. There is a small but meaningful pause between stimulus and response. In that pause, choice appears. The ego once filled that space with reflex, defense, or explanation. Now awareness fills it instead. The angels say this pause is where your power has returned. You are no longer being carried by old programming. You are deciding in real time who you want to be. There can be moments when you feel oddly disconnected from your past ambitions. You remember how driven you were, how much effort you poured into building something that now feels distant. This does not mean those efforts were wasted. They served their purpose. The angels explain that ambition built on survival eventually gives way to intention built on alignment. What motivates you now comes from a different place. It is quieter, but far more sustainable. You may also sense a shift in how you relate to control. Situations that once triggered anxiety now invite curiosity instead. You do not need to manage every variable. You trust yourself to adapt. This trust can feel foreign if your identity was shaped by hyper-responsibility. The ego may worry that letting go means losing direction. The angels assure you that direction is no longer something you force. It emerges when resistance fades. Another sign of this frequency change is the way you process feedback. Praise no longer inflates you, and criticism no longer defines you. You take what is useful and leave the rest without internal debate. This neutrality is not indifference. It is self-containment. The angels say you are no longer outsourcing your sense of value. You carry it with you, steady and intact. There may be a subtle sadness when you realize how much of your life was shaped by adaptation rather than choice. You see how often you adjusted yourself to fit environments that could not meet you. This awareness can sting, but it also brings relief. You no longer need to repeat those patterns. The angels encourage you to let this realization soften you, not harden you. Compassion integrates lessons faster than regret. You might find yourself drawn to simplicity. Complicated explanations feel unnecessary. Overloaded schedules feel draining. You crave clarity, space, and honesty. This is not withdrawal from life. It is refinement. The angels say your system is optimizing for coherence. What remains is what supports you. What falls away was never neutral. It was costing you energy. Your sense of identity is also shifting. You are less defined by what you do for others, and more by how you relate to yourself. This can feel uncomfortable if your worth was once tied to usefulness. The ego may question who you are without constant giving. The angels remind you that presence is more valuable than performance. You are learning to relate from authenticity rather than obligation. There are moments when you feel a deep calm that has no clear source. Nothing is resolved, nothing is perfect, yet something feels settled. This calm is not complacency, it is trust settling into the body. The angels say this is one of the clearest signs that your frequency has stabilized beyond the old reality. You are no longer chasing relief, you are inhabiting it. You may also notice that your tolerance for internal contradiction has decreased. You cannot say one thing and feel another without noticing. This congruence can be challenging because it requires honesty in small moments, but it also creates integrity. The angels say integrity is not about being flawless. It is about being aligned enough to notice when you are not. As this block unfolds, recognize that the sense of steadiness you feel is earned. It was built through countless moments of choosing yourself quietly, without applause. Your ego may still look for proof that this path is correct, but your body already knows. The old reality depended on tension to keep you engaged. This new way of being does not need urgency to feel alive. It is sustained by truth, and that truth is becoming easier for you to live each day. There is an increasing clarity about what you are no longer willing to tolerate, and this clarity does not come with anger. It arrives calmly, firmly, without negotiation. The angels are emphasizing this because it marks a major internal shift. Boundaries are no longer something you rehearse or justify. They exist naturally, felt in your body before your mind forms words. This can surprise you, especially if you once struggled to say no. Now, no feels like alignment rather than defense. You may notice that your energy responds immediately to environments and people. Some spaces feel expansive, others draining within minutes. This sensitivity is not fragility, it is precision. Your frequency has become more refined, and it no longer filters itself to endure what is misaligned. The ego may interpret this as intolerance, but the angels say it is discernment. You are honoring your capacity instead of overriding it. There is also a noticeable shift in how you relate to effort. You no longer believe that something must be difficult to be meaningful. Ease no longer triggers suspicion. When something flows, you allow it. This challenges old conditioning that equated struggle with worth. The angels remind you that effort born from fear exhausts, but effort born from truth sustains. You are learning the difference, and your body responds with relief. You may feel less reactive to urgency around you. Deadlines, expectations, and external pressure do not hook into you the way they once did. This does not mean you have lost motivation. It means your motivation is no longer driven by anxiety. The ego may fear that without pressure, nothing will move. The angels say your system is discovering a more intelligent rhythm, one that moves with intention rather than panic. Another sign of this frequency shift is how you experience self-respect. You notice when something crosses an internal line, even subtly. You correct course without drama. This self-respect is not loud. It does not announce itself. It is felt in the way you choose rest, in the way you disengage from conversations that cost too much, in the way you stop over-explaining your choices. You may also feel moments of emptiness that are not uncomfortable, just quiet. These moments are not voids. They are reset points. The angels explain that emptiness appears when old identities dissolve, and new ones have not yet fully formed. The ego rushes to fill these spaces with activity or meaning, but your system now knows how to wait without collapsing. This waiting is strength. There can be a subtle release of guilt around choosing yourself. You still care deeply, but you no longer confuse care with sacrifice. This distinction changes everything. The angels say you are learning how to stay open without leaking energy. This balance creates stability, and from stability, genuine connection becomes possible. You may also notice that you no longer replay conversations as much. Rumination loses its grip. Your mind does not circle endlessly around what you should have said or done. This is because your sense of self is no longer dependent on approval. The angels highlight that peace increases when the mind is no longer tasked with protecting an unstable identity. There is a growing trust in your own perception. You no longer need to gather excessive evidence before honoring what you feel. This does not make you reckless, it makes you responsive. The ego once demanded certainty before action. Now, alignment guides you forward step by step. The angels say, trust is being rebuilt at a foundational level. You may sense a quiet confidence that does not seek visibility. It is not performative. It does not compare. It simply exists. This confidence comes from coherence between what you think, feel, and do. When these layers align, external validation becomes optional. The angels say this is one of the most stable forms of self-assurance. As this block settles, recognize that your life no longer needs to be held together by force. The old reality depended on constant effort to maintain shape. Your current state allows things to organize naturally around truth. Your ego may still glance backward, but it no longer leads. Something deeper is guiding you now, and it does not rush. It moves with certainty, even in silence, and that is how you know the shift is real. You may begin to realize that your relationship with fear has changed. Fear still appears, but it no longer dictates your decisions. It informs you without controlling you. The angels are emphasizing this shift because fear once held authority in your inner world. It shaped choices, delayed truth, and kept you negotiating with what you already knew. Now, fear is simply a signal, not a command. This change may feel subtle, but it marks a deep internal reordering. You might notice that you recover faster from emotional impact. What once lingered now passes through with less residue. You do not suppress feelings, but you also do not merge with them. This creates space between experience and identity. The angels explain that this space is where freedom lives. You are no longer defined by what happens to you, but by how honestly you respond. There is also a growing awareness of how often you used to override your own needs, not with resentment, but with clarity. You see patterns without judging them. This perspective allows learning without self-punishment. The angels say this is emotional maturity at work. When shame dissolves, growth accelerates naturally. You may feel less inclined to rescue, fix, or overfunction for others. This does not come from indifference, it comes from respect. Respect for their path and respect for your limits. The ego once equated usefulness with worth. Now worth exists independently of output. The angels remind you that stepping back can be an act of trust, not abandonment. Your inner compass feels stronger now. You sense direction even when the destination is unclear. This reduces the need to control outcomes. You focus on alignment instead of certainty. The angels say this is why anxiety has less power over you. Anxiety thrives on imagined futures. Alignment anchors you in the present. You may also notice that your standards have shifted, not standards rooted in perfection, but in truth. You notice when something feels off sooner. You do not tolerate prolonged misalignment. This is not rigidity, it is self-honoring. The angels say clarity sharpens as compromise loosens its grip. There can be moments when you feel deeply grounded for no external reason. Nothing dramatic has happened, yet something feels solid. This groundedness is the result of internal consistency. You are no longer pulled in multiple directions by conflicting values. When inner conflict decreases, stability emerges. You may find that you speak more slowly, listen more deeply, and choose words with care. Communication becomes intentional rather than reactive. The angels highlight this because your voice now carries coherence. You no longer speak to manage perception. You speak to express truth. Another sign of this shift is your relationship with endings. You allow things to conclude without forcing closure. You accept when something has run its course. This acceptance does not erase sadness, but it prevents stagnation. The angels say completion does not always require understanding. Sometimes it only requires permission to let go. You might also sense a quiet trust forming in your ability to handle what comes next. You do not need guarantees. You trust your capacity to respond. This trust is built from lived experience, not belief. The angels say this is resilience integrated, not rehearsed. As this block unfolds, notice how little effort it now takes to stay aligned compared to before. What once required constant vigilance now feels natural. Your ego may still search for something to fix, but there is less to repair because less is being fractured. You are not holding yourself together anymore. You are allowing yourself to be whole. This wholeness does not demand perfection. It allows humanity. It allows rest. It allows truth without drama. The old reality thrived on tension to keep you engaged. Your current state does not need friction to feel real. It is grounded in presence, and presence is becoming your default.